One of the most important things you could do for your indoor air health is putting on the exhaust fan when you cook. You'd be shocked how many people don't ever turn on the fan. And think about it, how often do you turn on the overhead fan when you cook? And it's actually really important because the combustion reactions that happen when cooking actually pollute the indoor air. And that can affect your respiratory system, your heart, your brain, your fertility. So the more your food is steaming, the more you have to turn on that overhead fan. And really important, make sure that exhaust doesn't just diffuse into your attic. Make sure that that overhead fan leads to an outdoor reservoir. That's an easy and cheap way to optimize your air in your home. All right, everyone, welcome to Heal Thyself. Today, we are going to tackle a topic that affects every single person. You have heard me talk about air quality ad nauseum, so much, right? I talk about air purifiers, air filters. But it's really important for us to understand that the air we breathe is going to impact our overall health just as much as the food you're choosing to eat, right? A lot of us really prioritize, I'm going to eat healthy this year. But a lot of us don't think about, I'm going to breathe healthy this year. It's just as important as those things. If you have a really nice water purifier, but you're not doing anything for your air, for the air you breathe, more than we drink, more than we eat, we're missing the point. We really got to dive deep into this. Air quality matters, how it impacts your body matters. And we're going to talk a little bit about in the United States where you're going to find the best and worst air. By the end of this episode, you're actually going to have some actionable steps in order to optimize the air quality that you're being exposed to. Whether you're living in the number 1 of the 5 of the worst air, or you're living in number 1 of the 5 of the best air, you still want to optimize your home. So we're going to go over all these things. And for 2025, it's really important for me to give you all actionable steps. I don't want to leave you with any show where we're just living in the conceptual. So actionable steps is really important, empowering actionable steps, and we're going to do that. So I'm really excited for this to be the first one of the new year. Air matters, and we're going to go into why. So over 137 Americans live in areas with unhealthy levels of air pollution. Might be your city, right? And poor air quality contributes to 7 million premature deaths globally, according to the World Health Organization. I want to go back and say that poor air quality contributes to 7 million premature deaths. Are we starting to see that air quality actually really matters? Just as much as nutrition, just as much as water, definitely more than supplements, right? So we want to think about how we're going to get air quality to the optimum. The United States sees multiple spikes in air pollution, especially when there's wildfires. Definitely if you're living in a city and you're being exposed to industrial emissions from cars and power plants, urban congestion, and it's important. Why? I want you to take a guess right now. How many breaths do you think you take? What's the first gut instinctual reaction? Okay. Whatever that number is, think about it. Does that seem real? Does that seem accurate? Let's stick with it. Don't go any higher or lower. Just stick with it. Okay. We take about 20,000 breaths a day. So air is our most constant input in our body. Even more constant than is the environment safe? Is this person safe? Air is the most constant input that our body is trying to assess every single moment. So it stands to believe that air is one of the most important interventions for our health. Because unlike food or water, you can't always see, you can't always feel, and you definitely can't always avoid polluted air. Now, there's something called the Air Quality Index, and I want you to be familiar with this. Air Quality Index levels, 0 to 50, good. 300 plus, 301 plus, hazardous, okay? So when it comes to quality air, there are key pollutants that we're exposed to. Particulate matter, that usually coming from the industry or pollution. Particulate matter, that's PM 2.5. We're also exposed to ozone, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, which will kill you, and sulfur dioxide. And when we're exposed to these key pollutants, something happens in our body. Now, the reason why I want to talk about what happens in our body when we're exposed to poor air is for you to understand what your body is doing or fighting through when it's in poor air quality. And a lot of us don't realize that our body's actually going through these things right now. It's actually going through these things every single day. What a gift that your body loves you enough to be detoxifying constantly and working for your benefit so you actually feel semi-good or healthy or without pain in your body. And when it comes to poor air quality, look no further than first and foremost the respiratory system. It is the most immediate and noticeable effects of poor air quality. And it's felt throughout the whole respiratory system. Now, remember I mentioned particulate matter, PM 2.5. These are microscopic particles. They're so small that they can bypass all of your body's natural defenses. It goes past the nose hairs, past the mucus, and they actually penetrate deep into the lungs. And over time, it actually can scar your lungs or reduce your lung function or actually worsen chronic conditions if you have a kid with asthma or you have asthma, bronchitis, or COPD. What about ozone? I mentioned ozone. I want you to be familiar with this too. Ground level ozone is a highly reactive gas and it can irritate your airways. Now, short-term exposure, you're gonna have coughing, chest tightness, reduced lung capacity, but long-term can actually cause permanent damage, especially in children whose lungs are still developing. You know, the new year is here. And I've been reflecting on how to truly level up my health game. One thing I'm being super intentional about is not just about how I eat, but the quality of my supplements. This has been something that has been fundamental to the way I approach life in general. Quality, quality, quality. And when it comes to Puori's omega-3s, they are the top of the list. It is a top priority omega fish oil. It's the one that I recommend to all of my friends, all of my family. Well, why? What sets it apart is one, their commitment. And they're committed to using only small fish, which lowers our toxic exposure. And they're committed to rigorous testing. Every single batch is certified clean by the Clean Label Project and tested for over 200 contaminants. We're talking about heavy metals, pesticides, and everything in between. I take their omega-3s daily because I know I'm getting a premium source of EPA and DHA that is going to support my heart, my brain, my eyes, but I know I'm not going to be having any of those fishy burps that a lot of these fish oils get you. And this is the mindful choice we're making of 2025. We're throwing away all the stuff that doesn't deserve or have the privilege to be in your body. I partnered with Puori all of last year, and they're offering you, the Heal Thyself listener, right now, 20% off of their O3 Ultra Pure Fish Oil and all of their products. Head over to Puori.com, that is Puori.com/DRG, and use the code DRG at checkout. Again, that is Puori.com/DRG. And use the code DRG. If you love the podcast and you want to be down with the Dr. G Heal Thyself community, we give incredible tips every single week on getting a healthier physical, mental, and emotional body. The newest updates of my favorite products, the newest updates of my favorite practices. Stay in the loop by joining the Dr. G community. All you got to do is go to any one of my posts on Instagram and comment the word news. You'll get a DM to join. Let's think about these populations. Children, super vulnerable. Older adults, super vulnerable. Children have their respiratory system developing. Older adults have their respiratory system weakening. But it's really important to understand that these are the populations and us that really need to be cared for. It affects the heart. Air pollution does not just stop at the lungs. This particulate matter, PM 2.5, is going to cause inflammation, not only around the lungs, but systemically. Now, no one's really talking about this. Air quality, poor air quality, can actually cause the arteries to stiffen. It can cause the arteries to narrow. The blood vessels can be affected. It can actually cause plaque depositing. Wouldn't it be crazy if one of the major causes of heart attacks, the number one killer, is actually poor air quality, right? And it does. It increases the risk of heart disease. Studies are showing that people living in areas with high pollution levels have an elevated risk of heart attack, stroke, high blood pressure, and even living there short term increases the risk of irregular heartbeat, right? Arrhythmias. So people with pre-existing conditions now, like diabetes or high cholesterol, they have a really crappy diet, they have a really crappy lifestyle, and now they're being exposed to this poor air quality. That's going to elevate their risk through the roof. And air pollution is going to exacerbate all of these things. Now, it doesn't just stop at the heart. Poor air quality will affect the brain and mental health. We see emerging research that is showing that actually air pollution is linked to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Why? Because these little particulate inflammatory molecules can cross the blood-brain barrier, leading to inflammation in the brain. It can actually accelerate the aging of the brain. Mental health, chronic exposure to these particulate matters, chronic exposure to these pollutants. they've been linked to increases in anxiety, depression, and even suicide. In 2021, there was a study that found that higher levels of pollution are correlated with poorer mental health outcomes, especially if you're living in an urban area. Now, you couple that with low exposure to nature, trees, water, nature sounds, poor air quality, nature not being able to clean the air. Now you're setting the standard. And that standard that we're living in, especially people who are urbanites, we're really setting the standard for we have to fight for our health. Now, children who are exposed to high pollution levels when they're developing are right now higher risk of attention deficit disorder and lower IQ scores. Poor air quality will affect your immune system. Overexposure is going to suppress your immune system. It's going to exhaust it. Now you're more susceptible to all different types of infections. You're also susceptible to allergic reactions. Poor air quality has been shown to affect fertility. When I used to work with couples that were trying to get pregnant, I would always test their urine, test their blood, look at their toxic load, and then start working from that point outward, right? So how are we going to support the organs for detoxification, but also what are we going to do in the home? So everybody who's trying to get pregnant got an air purifier. You got to go get an air purifier. I'm going to go into that later. But when you look at the research, both male and female reproductive systems are affected by the pollutants, especially the heavy metals and those fine particles. They're going to affect fertility, especially sperm. Sperm quality will go down in men who are exposed to poor air quality. It's going to affect women in their hormonal balance. Pregnant individuals exposed to high levels of pollution actually face a higher risk of miscarriage, a higher risk of preterm birth, lower birth weight. Not just that. What about cancer? Well, you're going to think about lung cancer for sure. Yeah. These are air pollutants like benzene or formaldehyde, diesel exhaust, right? Working at a gas station or something like that, or being around a gas station. Yeah, that's at risk for developing lung cancer. But you might not have thought about this. And actually, my senior thesis in med school was on bladder cancer. And I remember learning about air quality and the things we breathe. The studies have found that actually exposure to these airborne carcinogens through the respiratory system, getting into the blood, are increasing the risk of bladder cancer because you're peeing them out. And if you think about it, like India is a country with really poor air quality. And in cities like Delhi, where air quality is actually at hazardous levels, oftentimes sustained at hazardous levels, hospitals oftentimes are reporting spikes in respiratory and cardiac emergencies. And those spikes are around those peaks in pollution. So the long-term health of people living there and their reduced life expectancy is staggering. And it's because of poor air quality. And guess what? You don't have to be living in India to worry about air quality. It's happening right here in the United States. So before we go into how to optimize ourselves and protect ourselves with poor air quality, well, what's the reason air quality gets poor? Well, there's the natural causes, wildfires, desert dust, volcanic activity, the things that will be here, even if industry is destroyed, if humans are destroyed, naturally, there's going to be things that affect the air. But the big thing are the human-caused pollution, right? The vehicle emissions, the industrial plants, agriculture, climate change, right? The rising temperatures, that's all affecting our air quality. But let's go to the industrial one. This is important. This is important because if you live near anywhere where there's industry, this is where you got to listen. Take a seat right now. Get your notepad out. This is really important information. And if you have someone you love that lives in a city or near industry, you know, I grew up in New Jersey. When you go from New York to New Jersey, you pass North Jersey. And in North Jersey, you see power plants, paper industry, you see marshes, towers, electrical towers. There's a lot of things going on between where I used to live and New York. And you always pass that. And in living in New Jersey, it's something that is really common. But when you think about how all of that industry in between New York and New Jersey, and that's just my experience here growing up, has affected the water, has affected the air in all of New Jersey and all of New York, over time, it really matters. And this is not to mention the pollution of New York. So let's think about this. Are we close to any industries that are polluting the air? So manufacturing and power plants, big. Factories and power plants are among the largest contributors to poor air quality. They're burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas. They're releasing pollutants into the air like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, fine particulate matters, that PM 2.5. If you live by these industries, and you have an air purifier, it's probably going to be red the whole time because it's trying to clear out all of that particulate matter that's being exposed to you and your home. Power plants are releasing mercury emissions. That's polluting the air, but also settling into the waterways. It's contaminating fish, affecting aquatic ecosystems. Oil refineries, a lot of those in New Jersey. Refineries process crude oil, right? And they use it and they create gasoline and diesel, and that emits volatile organic compounds, really nasty ones, that not only affect the immediate area, but over time create more smog. And the worst part is that these refineries are releasing really nasty chemicals. Benzene, that's a known carcinogen, right? Formaldehyde into these immediate communities. I think about like in the Appalachian area, construction and mining, heavy equipment used in construction and mining runs, using diesel, creating carbon monoxide. They create significant dust pollution, especially in dry areas, a lot of respiratory issues with people who are working there, but in the immediate neighborhoods too. And to all the people that live in the cities, vehicle emissions matter, right? Cities with heavy industrial zones, right? They have hot spots of pollution. And these residents are exposed to concentrated levels of these chemicals, right? I think of New York, I think of Los Angeles, I think of Houston, which is a super toxic city. They're facing high levels of diesel exhaust, right? Especially from shipping containers, trucking fleets, moving, pollution, right? There's a lot going on with a lot of chemicals and a lot of exhaust and a lot of industry. I would say if you can, stay away from these places. But then you stay away from these places and you move out to the country. Well, guess what? Agricultural industry is another industry that affects our air quality because they use things like ammonia and fertilizers. And the emission of ammonia used in these synthetic fertilizers creates pollutants. It creates secondary particulate matter. It worsens air quality. Also, the release of methane from livestock, nitrous oxide from livestock is also polluting the immediate air. And, I go back to my memory of that space between New Jersey, where I lived in New York. There are a lot of really low income communities there. And it's heartbreaking. I remember reading an article about a low income community, and I believe it was Houston near the railroads. And they were being exposed to a known carcinogen from the industry, and no one cared. No one did anything about it. And there's a lot of low income families that are developing cancer, right? That are getting really sick with chronic disease. I think of these communities and my heart goes out to them, right? Because they don't know and they're living where they can afford to live, but there's so much corruption in these industries that are making these people sick. And we see it in research. These low-income communities around these industries have higher levels of asthma, cancer, and other chronic diseases. And you might ask yourself, why does this happen? Well, guess what? There's regulations and loopholes around it. The Clean Air Act of 1970 significantly reduced pollution from the industry. I remember hearing stories in the 70s that New York was a smog fest, LA was a smog fest. But enforcement actually varies from state to state. It's not a blanket over all of the United States. And there's loopholes. Loopholes and exemptions are often actually allowing these industries to emit higher levels of pollutants. And because of that, there's a lot of oversight. And there's actually emerging industries right now that are adding into the poor air quality that we don't even think about, right? Cryptocurrency mining, as that grows, that's an energy intensive process. AI, especially creating photos and images and videos and movies, energy intensive process that is relying on fossil fuels. And what do you think that's doing? That's adding to air pollution. We have the advent of all these electric vehicles. They're promising for reaching climate goals and making the world a better place. But actually there's emissions from mining and processing of raw materials for the batteries for these electric vehicles like lithium and cobalt. And I want to go back to those low-income communities because think about it. Think about where you live and think about if you've seen any industry around you that pollutes the air. And what are the neighborhoods like around there? They actually have a name. They're called the sacrifice zones. And they experience higher rates of health issues like asthma, cardiovascular disease, cancer. So what are some ways to combat poor air quality? You got to stay informed, especially if you live in one of the areas with poor air quality with AQI monitoring. Use apps like AirNow, IQ Air, Plume Labs. These are going to monitor air quality in real time. AQI levels above 100 are unhealthy for the sensitive groups, while levels above 150 are unhealthy for everyone. So adjust your outdoor activities. And I know living in Los Angeles, this is something that I always use. And timing matters. When pollution is peaking in the afternoon due to high levels of ozone naturally, it might not be a good time to exercise or run. You might want to wait till the morning, next morning, or the next evening or that evening. And if you live somewhere where there's high pollution, wildfires, might be a good time to wear an N95 mask because that's actually going to be helpful at filtering out that particulate matter, PM 2.5. But really, more important than outdoor air is the indoor air, where you're spending a lot of your time. You want ventilation. Oftentimes, the indoor air is 100 to 1,000 times more toxic than outdoor air. How's that possible? Well, there's a lot of off-gassing that happens indoors. There's a lot of chemicals that are used indoors, especially in cleaning. So open the window strategically when the outdoor air quality is good, right? Especially after rain, which can actually temporarily reduce air pollution levels indoor. Use the exhaust fans. A lot of you have overlooked this. One of the most important things you could do for your indoor air health is putting on the exhaust fan when you cook. You'd be shocked how many people don't ever turn on the fan. And think about it. How often do you turn on the overhead fan when you cook? And it's actually really important because the combustion reactions that happen when cooking actually pollute the indoor air. And that can affect your respiratory system, your heart, your brain, your fertility. So the more your food is steaming, the more you have to turn on that overhead fan. And really important, make sure that exhaust doesn't just diffuse into your attic. Make sure that that overhead fan leads to an outdoor reservoir. That's an easy and cheap way to optimize your air in your home. Get an air purifier. A high quality air purifier can significantly improve your indoor air quality. What do you look for when you need to find an air purifier? HEPA filters. You want to find one that captures particles as small as 0.3 microns. That includes dust, pollen, and PM 2.5. You want a good CADR rating. That means faster air purification for larger spaces. You want to make sure your air purifier can pull in a lot of air to clean. And stay away from ionizers or ozone generators. These devices can actually worsen air quality. And make sure you're cleaning out your air filters. You want to make sure you stay on top of it. Don't run your portable air filters if the filters within it haven't been changed in a while. Which brings me to the overall system in the home. You want to make sure you're cleaning out the lungs of your home. The HVAC system is really, really important. The proper changing and maintenance of HVAC filters is going to go such a long way for indoor air quality. Make sure you're reducing the things that are going to adulterate your indoor air, like candles, incense, wood-burning fireplaces. They're going to emit soot and fine particles that can affect your respiratory system and the rest of your body. If you're painting, make sure you're using low VOC paint. And if there's any water damage that can be creating mold in the home, make sure you're attending to that immediately. I myself have an indoor air humidity measurer, and I keep it between 30 and 50%. So when indoor air is rising above 50%, I'll open my windows because I know it's getting too humid inside. Well, anything over 50%, definitely around 70%, is going to encourage mold growth. You want to make sure your indoor air, especially where it's dark or musty, you want to make sure your indoor air is dry in those areas. And you might even consider bringing in a dehumidifier to those spaces. Houseplants are amazing. They're not going to completely transform the air in your home, but there are some houseplants that will have a small effect on air quality. Those are things like spider plants, peace lilies, Boston ferns. They're going to improve the humidity levels, and they're actually going to create a fresher environment, and it's good for your mental health. All right, and let's get to my favorite part, the 5 United States cities with the worst air quality. Right now that we explored the science and the impact of air quality, let's take a closer look. Let's take a closer look at the 5 United States cities that are really there with the worst air quality. And these rankings are based on long-term data from the American Lung Association and other environmental monitoring organizations. And they're focused on ozone levels, particulate matter, PM 2.5, and just overall pollution sources. So here are the cities with the 5 worst air quality. Number 5, Houston, Texas. It is a hub for oil and gas industry. Houston faces many volatile organic compound emissions, which are contributing to the high levels of ozone. The city has frequent humidity, lack of strong winds, traps pollutants, and overall public health. Air quality in Houston is really poor, but it's not the worst. Here are 4 more. Number 4, Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix actually experiences high levels of ozone pollution due to vehicle emissions, industrial activity, and the city's urban heat island effect, which basically intensifies pollutant reactions in the atmosphere. And because of Arizona's natural dust storms, that too is affecting and worsening air quality. Number 3, worst air quality in the United States. Look no further than Fresno, California. Located in the Central Valley, Fresno is exposed to agricultural dust, agricultural pollution, and wildfire smoke. This region frequently records dangerous levels of both ozone and PM 2.5, particularly in the summer months. I have been to Fresno in the summer. I dated a girl there. Oh my Lord. It not only has a certain smell to it, but it's really hard to breathe there. Number 2, worst air in the country, Bakersfield, California. It's in the Central Valley, and Bakersfield suffers from significant particulate pollution. Its air quality is impacted by nearby oil refineries. It's got agricultural exposures, vehicle emissions, all of which become trapped in the valley. And during certain months, that PM 2.5 level can actually exceed safe thresholds. And that's causing health concerns from respiratory issues to brain issues to heart issues to fertility issues to cognitive mental health issues. And the number 1 worst air in the country, this pains me to say it, I don't even want to look up and talk about it, Los Angeles, California. Oh my God. It's known for its smog, especially in the 70s. Los Angeles frequently tops the charts for ozone pollution. Why? It's got a high population density. It's got heavy traffic. It's got warm climate that's trapping the pollutants in the atmosphere. It's got wildfire smoke, especially worse in the recent years, that's degraded the city's overall air quality, exacerbating respiratory issues and all those other issues that have to do with being exposed. If you live in this city or any other 4 cities that I just mentioned, it is without a question that you have to optimize your home air by having air purifiers in there at the very least. On the flip side, let's explore the cities with the cleanest air in the United States. These are the cities that are characterized by low pollution levels, strong environmental policies, and geographical factors that actually reduce airborne toxins. Let's go to the number 5 cleanest air in the United States, Bangor, Maine. Shout out to the people out there. It's a small city in New England, and it's got minimal industrial pollution, is surrounded by pristine forests. It's got strict environmental regulations to ensure that the air quality stays where it is. Bangor residents are breathing good air. Number 4, Anchorage, Alaska has some of the best air in the country. They have Arctic air and low industrial activity. They have clean air to breathe. And while there may be some wildfires, its overall pollution levels are low to make this list as number 4. Let's go deeper into it. Number 3, cleanest air in the country, Burlington, Vermont. Burlington is a city that has a big benefit from its focus on renewable energy, and it's got a small urban footprint. It is surrounded by forests, mountains. This city is consistently ranking as one of the cleanest cities in the United States. Shout out to Vermont. Number 2, cleanest air in the country, Honolulu, Hawaii. And you can thank that to the trade winds that sweep through the islands. Honolulu enjoys consistently clean air. It's got a reliance on renewable energy like solar and wind, and it's minimized in its industrial emissions. Shout out to Honolulu. And the number 1 cleanest air in the United States, Cheyenne, Wyoming. Cheyenne's low population density and lack of heavy industry keeps its air remarkably clean. If any of you have ever been to Montana, you see open plains, and that allows pollution to disperse naturally. Let me attest to something. I was just in Vermont for the holidays, and noticeably clean, and I live in Los Angeles, noticeably clean air. I wasn't in Burlington, Vermont. I was in Woodstock, Vermont. I'm actually wearing a Woodstock, Vermont hat right now that I bought there. And the air is so crisp, so clean. I really have a love for Vermont, but I have a love for anywhere that has clean air, and I need to vacation there more. So I hope you got a lot out of this show. I wanted to start the new year off with really important information. Remember, air is the number 1 input to your body. It is the thing you are most consistently exposed to, more than food, more than supplements, more than water, more than people. 20,000 breaths you take a day. You want to make sure those breaths are optimized. So even if you're living in a city with poor air quality on the outside, think about how you can optimize and do that legwork on the inside. And if you have the option of moving, start thinking about moving to a place with clean air quality. It's going to go a long way. We know that toxic air can affect multiple systems, not just your respiratory one. So I really hope you feel empowered. You got a lot to do. There's a lot of information here. You can always go back and listen. Share this with someone who lives in a city. Share this with someone who lives near any sort of industry. This year, we're doing everything to protect ourselves, but we're also going to celebrate life. That's what Heal Thyself will be about in 2025. Thank you all of you who've been listening for such a long time. Really, my heart goes out to you. We've been doing this for now going on 5 years. All the love to you. If you haven't, rate, review, and subscribe. It helps the show become more visible to more people. Thank you. I love you. See you next week.